Welcome to the Sportsman's Voice Roundup, your weekly look at conservation and sporting community news happening across the nation and on the Hill. Thanks for tuning in. This is the TSV Roundup.
All right, folks, this is it. Our final Sportsman's Voice Roundup. In 2024, this is for the week of December 16th, 2024. It's been a busy year. No doubt we are heading into a slower news cycle here in the last couple weeks of the year. That does not mean our work slows down. In the conservation policy space, I can tell you, as of this recording, lots of potential bills being dropped throughout the country as we look forward to sessions coming back in after the new year. So we will enjoy the holidays and the New Year celebration, but we will be hitting the ground running in 2025. I can't believe I'm saying that. 2025. I surely expected cars to be flying, teletransport, beam me up, Scotty. I guess I'm slightly disappointed, but hey, whatever. We made it to 2025, and that seems such a lofty goal when I was a young child, and some of you listening, well, even more so because you're probably a lot older than me. But anyway, we're here. We made it. Let's get into the headlines. Atlantic striped bass on rebuilding trajectory, but is it fast enough? A CSF priority to clean up abandoned mines heads to the president's desk. Crossbow opportunities. Blackboard to backwoods. Michigan bill allowing hunter education in schools clears a Senate hurdle. That's very cool. Renewal of anti firearm legislation anticipated for the 2025 Washington legislative session. And reflecting on the successes of the NAS Network and Governor Sportsman's Caucus members in the Mid Atlantic region. All that and more. Let's get to our lead story, and that is a CSF priority to clean up abandoned mines heads to the president's desk here in the final days of the year. This from Taylor Schmitz. After more than 2 decades of work, the Good Samaritan Redemption of Abandoned Hard Rock Mines Act, a bipartisan effort to reduce burdensome roadblocks to restoring mine sites that can pollute streams, is heading to the president's desk to be signed into law. The passage of the Good Samaritan Remediation Abandoned Hard Rock Mines, that's not a mouthful at all, is another example of the broad bipartisan support that issues of importance to sportsmen and women continue to see in Congress. Last week, the House of Representatives passed 2781, the Good Samaritan Remediation of Abandoned Hard Rock Mines Act, a longstanding priority of CSF, which passed the Senate earlier this year by unanimous consent. The legislation is led in the Senate by Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus members Senators Heinrich, Risch, and in the House by CSC members Reps Malloy, Peltaloa, among many other CSC members who were critical in getting this bill through Congress. On December 10th, the House of Representatives passed the act, delivering a win on our priority item that has been decades in the making. I'd like to thank the aforementioned members for their efforts in spearheading this legislation. 2781 will promote public private partnerships to restore the health of public lands and waters that have been polluted by damaged by abandoned mine sites across the nation. There's estimated to be approximately 500,000 abandoned mines across the United States that are polluting over 100,000 miles of streams. Estimates also indicate that cleaning up these abandoned mines would cost $54 billion. Unfortunately, under current federal law, an individual group cannot touch or attempt to clean up the mine without being held liable for future pollution, even if that individual or group is not responsible for the original pollution, limiting the opportunities to restore these lands. This bipartisan legislation seeks to provide protections to those individuals attempting to clean up abandoned mines. Specifically, the bill allows for 15 pilot sites to be cleaned up across the nation to demonstrate effective restoration as well as the fact that environmental safety measures can be met. CSF looks forward to seeing the president sign this legislation into law and again thanks the bill sponsors for their leadership in delivering this win for conservation. That's good news. And yet another conservation sporting community bill likely signed by the president here. Think about back to last year of only a handful of bills getting signed, and our community had a couple of them. So continue to prove our issues matter to all and to both sides. So great stuff there. Connor Barker is bringing us this piece on crossbows and extending opportunities and providing access. Subject we've touched on quite a bit in the past here, and um, Connor talks about our position on crossbows and then creating access for folks. He highlights that much like other types of archery equipment can be effective tools for managing game populations, especially in urban and suburban areas where the use of firearms may be prohibited. Some states, such as Kentucky, offer crossbow seasons that provide additional opportunities for hunters to get a field, while others, 29 states, allow unrestricted crossbow use during archery seasons. CSF continues to advocate for the full inclusion of crossbows in archery seasons across the country. While crossbows are an effective means of take that provide an additional opportunity for folks to get a field, they're also a valuable tool for certain age demographics or individual with disabilities to participate in time honored traditions. Crossbows are unique in the fact that, with their growing popularity, they can be relatively inexpensive and easy to find on a store shelf. Additionally, as the suburban and urban communities around the country face growing populations of deer, crossbows offer an effective means of controlling game populations, especially when paired with urban archery seasons. In 2019, Kentucky expanded its crossbow season by nearly 50 days. Wow, that's a lot. While still maintaining a 2-week vertical bow season, 5 years later, Kentucky has seen archery harvest rates remain stable despite many hunters arguing that expanding crossbow use would significantly reduce traditional archery participation. During the 2018-19 Kentucky deer season, one season before the crossbow expansion, 13% total deer harvest were with traditional archery equipment. Fast forward to 23-24 Kentucky deer season, following the 19 crossbow expansion, 11% of total deer harvest were with traditional archery equipment. Furthermore, Kentucky saw a 6% increase in deer harvest with a crossbow while still maintaining a steady archery harvest rate when comparing the 18-19 season with the 23-24 season. We will continue, CSF, to advocate for the expansions of crossbow hunting seasons to better provide sportsmen and women with additional opportunities to pursue our time honored traditions. Maybe one or two of you gonna get a crossbow under a tree in a handful of days. You never know. As Connor highlighted, some of those variants can be pretty affordable, others not so much. Um, but for the first timer getting into it, yeah, why not? Our good friends at Bass Pro and Cabela's probably can take care of you. They're running great sales. Be a whole lot of fun to get a crossbow under the Christmas tree, no doubt. Here's some good news out of Michigan. Love when Bob Matthews brings us the good news. Senate Bill 664 was introduced by Michigan Legislative Caucus co-chair Senator John Bumstead, and its companion House Bill 5334 was introduced by fellow caucus member Representative Kurt Vanderwall. Together, the bills have more than 70 bipartisan co-sponsors, as well as the support of both the Michigan Department of Natural Resources and the Michigan Department of Education. Very cool. Advancing hunter education opportunities in school is a policy priority for Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation. During the 24 session, CSF has actively worked with legislators and stakeholder partners to help guide these bills through the legislative process. Senator Bumstead and longtime co-chairman of the Michigan Legislative Sportsman's Caucus introduced 664 along with Senator Cherry, mandating that the Michigan Department of Natural Resources collaborate with the Department of Education to adopt and make available to schools a model program of firearm safety instruction. A course would both count as an elective credit and qualify as a classroom portion of Michigan's hunter education requirement. Although the bill does not allow firearms to be brought into the classroom setting, the course would instruct students on proper firearm handling, safety, storage, and maintenance while exposing students to hunting and the numerous benefits that it provides to conservation and society at large. CSF has worked with the caucus in developing this concept since before the bill was first introduced in 2023 and has continued to support throughout the bill's legislative cycle. Following its unanimous approval by the Senate Committee on Natural Resources and Ag, the bill moved to the floor for full consideration, where it was passed almost unanimously. The bill has since been received by the House and could be passed this week. Senate Bill 664, sister legislation, House Bill 5334, has more than 50 bipartisan co sponsors in the House, including Michigan Legislative Sportsman's Caucus co chairs Representative Sarah Leitner and Representative Amos O'Neill, who also sits on our NASC Executive Council. Great seeing Representative O'Neill at NASC in Baton Rouge, by the way. Great to see his name on this. For youth that may not have grown up participating in hunting or may not have been exposed to the outdoors by family members, allowing elective hunter education course in school stands to create perspective, lifelong hunters. As the legislative session nears conclusion in Michigan, CSF will continue to support Senate Bill 664 and the general concept of hunter education in schools throughout the country. This is fantastic. Uh, I really hope we're able to bring you some follow up good news in the new year from Bob that did get passed. Um, and really, this is if you don't have it in your states, we'd love to talk to you. We'd love to make that happen and get those in the states where it's not an option. And obviously, Michigan, a lot of the knock gets put out there about having firearms in the classroom. Well, here you go. Michigan's not doing it, and they're going to be able to facilitate that training and expose the kids to conservation and the sporting community's role in conservation and what true conservation is. So that's a great opportunity there. Again, interested legislators listening, if this is something you want to be proactive about. Again, we'd love to talk to you. Get your state legislative sportsman's caucus involved and championing legislation like that. That's a great one that should get a lot of positive traction. Coming from the Northwest, this from Marie Newmiller. Renewal of anti firearms legislation anticipated for 2025 Washington legislative session. Can't entirely say I'm surprised. As the Washington State 2025 legislation nears, we are anticipating that several anti gun bills will be revisited. Previous sponsors of Washington House Bill 1902 have demonstrated public support for renewing a quote permit to purchase bill that failed in 24. Bills like this place unnecessary burdens on local police departments, legal hunters, and sporting shooters, and can be a risk to the American system of conservation funding. Washington House Bill 1902, permit to purchase firearms, failed last year, well, this year, but is likely to be renewed in the coming session, according to a recent press release from the past bill sponsor and supporters. A similar measure passed in Oregon that has been deadlocked in the court since the passage in 2022. Had 1902 passed in 2024, it would have required a permit to purchase a firearm in Washington state, any firearm. To obtain this permit, individuals would be required to complete a firearm training course, pass a criminal background check, and have their fingerprints taken. As proposed in 1902, the permit would be valid for a period of 5 years, cost $28 per application renewal, not including additional fingerprinting processing fees due with the first application. Should Washington State Patrol decide to charge for those fingerprints in pursuant with RCW 4343742. Gotta say, quick editorial, and coming from the Northeast here where we're dealing with this foolishness in mass, it was a lot of this in mass. Last I checked, a little thing called the Second Amendment does not come with these provisions, but alas. Let's continue on. The permit to purchase firearms is not a completely new concept. For example, in 2022, ballot measure 114 was enacted by voters in Oregon requiring a permit to purchase. Bills like these place heavy burdens on police departments and agencies by adding additional reviews on top of already federally mandated background checks at the time of purchase via the NICS. The administrative burden and questions of a constitutionally led several sheriffs in Oregon to vow that they would not enforce the rule. Good for them. In addition, several lawsuits were immediately filed in November 22, which have been held, which have held the bill's future in limbo as the appeals process continues 2 years later. CSF filed an amicus brief, or amicus, depending on who's saying it, in support of the National Shooting Sports Foundation back case against Measure 114 in Oregon. If a permit to purchase were to pass Washington state during the 25 session, it will almost assuredly face similar legal battles as Oregon's Measure 114 and may create similar constitutionality concerns for Washington sheriffs and enforcement officers or offices as seen in Oregon. Again, more foolishness, idiocracy coming out of the standard regions of the country. It is unfortunate. It's unfortunate for those citizens, but we just went through a whole election cycle, and if you didn't try to correct it, and maybe it's maybe it's a function of these bigger metropolitan areas that are just um, basically making the decision for all the rest of the folks, which happens up here in the Northeast quite a bit. Um, Not sure how to solve that right now. However, this specific instance um, should meet a demise, should meet a whole lot of legal barriers, and good for those sheriffs, man. That you get a lot of if you get a good sheriff that will let common sense rule, that's a huge deal. And those are elected officials also. So at least in those locales or those sheriffs are being elected, the ones that are adhering to the Constitution and also agreeing that the Second Amendment does not come with qualifiers. Good for them. Good luck, Washington. Hopefully, kill that the legislative process and not continue to waste the good people's resources and time and treasure in the state fighting foolishness that ought not be brought in the first place. I digress. Let us head to the Mid Atlantic for happier reporting from Kaylee Leager, looking back at successes because of our NAS network and the Governor Sportsman Caucus members in the Mid Atlantic. Fresh off the heels again of our NAS Sportsman's uh, summit. Haley is bringing to us examples of what was experienced in the Mid Atlantic as far as successes, highlighting here. And again, demonstrating the strength of the NAS network and our additional Governor Sportsman's Caucus. All right, let's hit the punch list here. Hunters in Maryland. I think we reported on much of this over the year. Hunters in Maryland can continue to use lead ammunition for hunting besides waterfowl. Senate Bill 983 would have created a lead ammunition phase out ban, or phase out and ban, more or less, for hunters in the old line state. This is a huge one here. Bird hunters in Delaware can now hunt on Sundays during regulated hunting seasons for game birds, waterfowl, doves, upland birds, and turkeys. Fantastic. House Bill 271 removed the longstanding legislative prohibition on Sunday game bird hunting, allowing the Division of Fish and Wildlife to implement Sunday hunting. Good news in Pennsylvania, the Fish and Bow Commission can continue to set their own license fees for an additional 10 years. House Bill 1409 granted the Fish and Bow Commission the continuation of the ability to respond to in timely manner to changes in inflation and keep up with funding changes to produce sound conservation work and access and opportunity for residents and visitors. Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission is funded 100% by the sportsmen and women of the Commonwealth. In the Virginias here, numerous attempts to pass legislation in West Virginia for free and or discounted licenses without a reimbursement model in place were successfully thwarted, protecting crucial conservation funding via the American System of Conservation Funding. Virginia Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus leadership supported stationary blind legislation that would improve access and safety for waterfowlers and boaters. That was signed into law. Um, Little bit of sad news, and we've covered this, and we went into at depth at NASC during the NASC sessions. But as previously reported in the EPUB and on this program, Pennsylvania was a stone's throw away from becoming the 48th state to offer more robust Sunday hunting opportunities before Senate Bill 67 rather, stalled outright in the end of the session here. And to that point, there's more good than bad here. So as observed throughout the country, the Mid-Atlantic region celebrated more successes than losses in 2024. Uh, as we just discussed, the protection of conservation funding via ASCF was protected. In the Virginias, we got those Sunday hunting opportunities in Delaware, the ability for Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission to control their price setting is a big deal. As it pertains to Senate Bill 67 in Pennsylvania, Senator Dan Laughlin, a previous Sportsman's Caucus co-chair, released a legislative memo revealing his plans to reintroduce the initiative during the upcoming legislative session. Even though Senate Bill 64 ultimately failed, it laid a strong foundation for its potential yet optimistic passage in 25. And certainly, Kaylee, in-state partners, CSF at large, we will be all over this right away and try to get this thing moved right through for the residents and visitors of Pennsylvania to be able to hunt on Sundays. Uh, Again, this article further demonstrating the ability of the state legislative sportsmen's caucuses and the NASC network when they come to our summit. When our EC members reach out to co-chairs and leadership across the country and work together, discuss strategy and discuss what's been happening in their states, what's working, what's not working, how do we champion similar policy priorities, things like that. Here, there's just one region where a lot of this stuff came to fruition because of that. Finally, Atlantic striped bass on rebuilding trajectory, but is it fast enough? This from Chris Horton. With an estimated 7.5 million anglers who pursue Atlantic striped bass, it is the most economically and culturally important recreational fish species from North Carolina to Maine. It is vitally important to communities along the mid and upper Atlantic seaboard that striped bass are sustainably managed for abundance and access by the angling public. While the latest stock assessments indicate that recent cuts in recreational harvest opportunities have achieved their goal of reducing fish mortality, the increasing population of older striped bass may not reach the biomass target by 2029 as planned. The Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, Striped Bass Management Board, is considering additional management options. And the Congressional Sportsman's found that CSF, I get tongue tie here at the end of the year. CSF weighed in. ASMFC is considering further reducing angling opportunities for Atlantic striped bass to slightly increase the probability of hitting their population goals in 2029. Recreational fishing restrictions implemented over the last 2 years have been successful in reaching the fish mortality target to rebuild the population. The lower projected probability of rebuilding has more to do with lower recruitment than fishing effort, and as such, CSF does not support making any additional changes to the existing regulations. Today, Atlantic Striped Bass Management Board is considering, and today being Monday as of this reporting, as you're hearing this on Wednesday. They were considered whether additional harvest restrictions on the Atlantic striped bass fishery are needed, given the latest stock assessment and the current projections that the stock has slightly lower chance of rebuilding by the target year 2029 than originally expected. However, since the current restrictions on recreational fishing have reduced fishing mortality levels to their lowest point in 30 years, and because the population continues to increase in abundance, CSF pushed back on the need for any further changes in a comment letter to the board. And again, if you get the EPUB, you can go to Chris has that linked in his article. You can read that letter. Marine fisheries management is very complex, primarily relying on the projections of what can be caught in the future, given what was landed in the past. These projections are based on a number of assumptions, like how many young fish will be entering or adding to the population annually, and what the overall biomass of the population should be. The only thing the ASMFC can control is fishing effort, which they have done through recent slot limits and bag reductions. In fact, these recent management challenges over the last 2 years have reduced fishing mortality to the target mortality levels that allow rebuilding likely even lower. One of the variables that they cannot control is recruitment or the number of juvenile striped bass produced each year. Historically, Chesapeake Bay accounts for 70 to 80% of all striped bass production in the Atlantic. However, over the last several years, that recruitment has been well below the average and likely due to changing environmental conditions in the bay, including a shorter, suitable water temperature window in the spring for spawning. Due to the fact that fishing mortality is where it needs to be rebuild the population, even in a low recruitment scenario, and the population continues to rebuild as a result, though slightly slower. CSF believes it is not necessary to impose further restrictions on anglers and the business they support along the Atlantic coast. I can report to you that that all was shut down because of the pushback, and there is no further uh, restrictions being in place after Chris's letter was submitted and others got involved. Um, I believe that came out almost right away at that meeting, so good news there. Um, Vitally important fishery, striped bass. I can tell you, I look forward to what I affectionately call the spring surf and turf every May. When turkeys start to gobble and the dogwoods bloom, the striped bass run has reached the shores of all 14 miles of New Hampshire and its tributaries coming up into the Piscataqua River, brackish water system, chasing alewives up into the freshwater of the Lamprey River and Swampscott rivers here in southern coastal New Hampshire. Um, and that migration continues on up the rocky shores of Maine, and then the late summer fall migration heading back down to the bay, where those mid Atlantic coasts get to enjoy so much great striper fishing, especially there in Montauk and Jersey Shore, Jersey Coast, getting down to the bay. So yeah, huge fishery creates a lot of great recreational opportunity and access. And I will say, I think I mentioned this on the program, at least in the early fall, the striper run this year was just, it was off the charts. Folks I know that are out there almost daily just said some of the best fishing they've had in the better part of a decade. Um, so it touches a lot of folks, a lot of businesses, a lot of ecotourism. Um, glad we got the result there, and hopefully that population, that fisheries, will rebound and continue to work towards that. Seems things are working. Why change it? Why do anything more? And here's the result. All right, that's the show. Appreciate you. Somehow this went a little longer than I anticipated, but that's it. Last TSV roundup for the year 2024. We will come back to you tomorrow for our final feature presentation. Again, lighthearted episode here. A sportsman's gift guide, if you will, for the last minute shoppers. As this thing releases on Thursday, um, you will have a few moments, a few days to shop. So pay attention, tune in, pass this along to the procrastinator in your family, give them some hints. Anyway, we'll get into that tomorrow. Thanks as always for listening. Thanks to my colleagues for their reporting all year. Thanks to my colleagues for coming on and talking about their issues and their regions and representing CSF so well on the program, representing their legislative sportsmen's caucuses that they work with on their reporting. And it doesn't stop. The grind doesn't stop. And it's so great to work with a whole host of talented folks here at CSF and the enthusiasm they have and carry with them throughout the entire year. Even when, it seems like there's some insurmountable hills to climb and summit, we do. And we press on and we look forward to the next session enthusiastically to protect our traditions, to protect the sporting community, uh, conservation funding, making sure this system that has worked for damn near 100 years continues to lead the way. Um, yeah. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah, everything that you may be celebrating. Enjoy it. Take some time to relax, recharge those batteries before we head into 2025. Folks are still out there hunting, so if you're enjoying those primitive seasons, those late muzzleloader seasons, whatever season you're in, have fun, be safe out there, put some wild game on the holiday table, and we will see you on the Roundup in 2025. As always, CSF is your inside connection to outdoor legislation. See y'all next year. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, your support is crucial, and you can help us out right now by leaving a review, filling in those 5 stars where available, sharing this episode with friends and family, and engaging with us socially. CSF can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Together, we can protect the outdoor sports we love and continue to keep you informed wherever you are. That's it for this week. Until next time, we'll see you later.